Well, here we are with DJ Ron.
Here we are with Mr. Chris Goss.
In Hackney, Wick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Local. How long was your cycle to get here?
I think it was about 4 minutes.
Was it really?
Yeah. About 4 or 5 minutes. Yeah, something like that.
And you are Hackney born and bred?
Hackney born and bred. Yeah.
Lived in Hackney your whole life?
I've moved. I lived in Ealing when I studied there.
Okay.
For some time, and I lived in America for a little while when my son moved there. But whenever I came back, I always came back to Hackney.
Yeah. And I mean, we were just talking about it when we were having coffee. What Hackney has changed.
Absolutely.
Like
you wouldn't
more
recognise
than
it.
we can. You know, like my mum's lived down the road from you for 30 years, and it's mad, isn't it? Like when I was saying to you, when I come out the station here, and all of a sudden it's like there's towers everywhere.
Well, around here particularly, even to my surprise, because I haven't been to Hackney, I don't even think it's been in less than a year. And the infrastructure being built now is like incredible. It's like, if that's the right word, incredible.
Yeah.
It's going to be like Hong Kong in a minute, where like all the buildings are so close together, and I suppose this brings finance into the councils and stuff like that.
But hopefully Hackney is still retaining original Hackney people alongside new people.
I've got a view on that. I've had a view on that for some time, because where I live opposite London Fields, and so
great view, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. And so I see the people who go to the park. I see the people who go to Broadway Market.
Yeah.
I see the people who go to Columbia Road. I see people all around.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I think to myself, oh, right, these are newcomers to the area. In fact, there are people who travel from distance to come be in London Fields during the summertime. But I got to find out, actually, that there are still a lot of locals, they just don't go to those places.
Right.
You know? And so while it's changed a lot, and there's a lot of talk about gentrification, there's a lot of talk about being outpriced in many ways.
Sure, yeah.
There is also the benefits that I can remember there was a time when you couldn't necessarily walk through London Fields.
Sure, yeah.
Certainly my mum couldn't walk through there. So it's got its benefits, and I'm happy with where I live and the people that I around there across both originals and newcomers. Yeah.
So your route into being a music guy, maybe specifically as a DJ, late 80s, mid 80s when you started?
Early 80s. Yeah, early 80s.
So a seminal record that I've spoken to you about a lot, and which, in all honesty, I first came across thanks to our very good friend Dynamite, Dominic, when I was around his flat some years ago, and he had a whole bunch of battered records on his shelf. And I was like, go on then, let's pull some vinyl off the shelf. And the first thing he pulled out is Soul All Day of the Century from 1987, I think. And that's, amongst many others, your good self.
Yes, that's right.
DJing as part of a crew?
We were a sound system called TNT Roadshow.
Right.
And so you asked, was it late 80s or whatever? That was coming to the sort of like the latter part of that era. Because if that came out in 87, you can imagine that 88, 89, the acid scene came in.
Right, yeah.
So if you go back earlier than that to 1983, TNT was sort of like the sort of sound system of Hackney that was a bit different to your traditional sound systems, where they would probably play a lot more reggae and be known for that reggae sort of vibe. We didn't play any reggae. We played like hip hop, we played soul, we played electro, we played a lot of cutting edge music that at the time was just kind of hitting the stores of London from around the world, really, but predominantly the US.
But that record, I mean, do you remember? I think it's Billy Bunter, who has a great Instagram channel and great YouTube channel, who is always celebrating, the roots of dance music, British music, black music, and he specifically draws that record and your feature on that.
Yes.
Right, which only just a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Did you know at that time that a record like that was having that kind of impact, or were you not even aware of that maybe?
Some years ago, I'd even go as far as to say 3 to 4 years ago, maybe even 5, Bailey, DJ Bailey, big up Bailey, he hit me up and was like, I think he just sent me a WhatsApp message and was like, is that you?
Yeah.
Right? And then periodically I would get like notifications from people saying like, is that you?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it's me. And it's like, oh, right, I had a feeling it was you. So, but no, I didn't really know it was having like that sort of traction to people who I knew in my scene.
Yeah.
As it did. So, and it's, you know what I mean? It's kind of like humbling to when you hear people are like, yeah, man, this record.
100%. I mean, I was just checking that Insta feed, and I mean, Doc Scott, that album inspired me to be a professional DJ.
Wow.
Charlie Dark, our good friend, I spent hours in my bedroom listening to that mix.
Wow.
Fracture, absolutely incredible record. Right, just a selection of people that I like, because I think, you know, and some of us are of an age, and even for the DJs that were coming after you, still being very, very inspired by that. So, I mean, that's pretty special. From there, you went on to some seminal residencies in the 90s, such as like Jungle Fever and
I'd like to. I think for me, you know, like I played very early on at places like Amnesia House and Genesis. You know, Telepathy. In the version of Telepathy that was in the rave days. This is before the sort of jungle era per se, which most people associate them with. But when to the sort of like the quintessential jungle sort of like kicked in, that was Roast.
Right.
Yeah, that was Roast. And I frankly, I don't think they get the notoriety that they should get for what they did for that brand of jungle.
Yeah.
And because at that time it wasn't really coined that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And which venue was that?
Well, the very first one I played at was Turnmills, which was in Clerkenwell Road. And that
amazing
was
club.
Yeah, that was on a Sunday afternoon.
Right.
And at that time, it was called a Sunday roast.
That's
where it came from.
Yes, okay, right.
So it was a Sunday, and it was in the afternoon, you have a Sunday roast.
Amazing.
And when it went on to elsewhere, it was just called Roast. But
and sorry, when it started there, 90...
I'd say as early as 1990, 91 even.
Okay.
It was 1990, 91.
Okay.
And but the tenure there wasn't that long, as I recall. But it was, it did have its sort of like journey before I got there. So I was like an afterthought.
Surely not, Ron.
Yeah. And just a short anecdote was that how I got to play was that somebody who was going there was like, yeah, man, come bring your records, I can get you to play, no problem. You know, I'll definitely get you to play. I said, all right, cool. And turned up with my records, walked in, and he just walked off. And it was heaving in there.
Yeah, right.
It was heaving in there. And it was like house in the same room.
Right, yeah.
It was like house, it was, you know, breaks, hardcore. It was that sort of music at that time, as you can imagine in the earliest of the 90s.
Yes, yeah.
And then somebody didn't turn up. And this is a classic, almost cliche story, because there's always somebody who doesn't turn up that gives you your break.
Yeah.
And then I went on, and then I played and I became resident after that. Yeah.
Amazing. And when did you start releasing your own produced music?
It's a good question.
93?
Yeah, it's a good question.
That's what Discog says.
Yeah, exactly. on paper, it says 1993, but I remember having a go a little bit earlier than that.
Okay.
When Rebel Conganati and I were toying with like music production. And this was like, again, very early on in the 90s, if not the late 80s.
Yeah.
And we did a record which was called EastEnders, and he was rapping on it. And then I'm scratching on it, and he's like rapping about the EastEnders show and whatever. Yeah, yeah. So that was the earliest. That was the very earliest. I didn't really understand what was happening in that process, to be fair.
And you started London Something as a label, which was your label.
Yeah, but London Something as a label, I think that it's fair to say that was around about 1993. Okay. Albeit, if you look at London Something 001, it will say 1994, I think. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And then, but things must have been bubbling away, because the reason that we're talking is because of your debut album, which was signed to BMG to be released on their Parousia label.
That's right.
Which was 97.
That's right, yeah.
But so, and you know, we both know that kind of explosion of not just jungle, but as drum and bass music evolved in sort of 95, in 96. And there were some record deals were being made, you know, for people like Adam F and Groove Rider and Dillinger and et cetera, and your good self.
Yes.
So how did that record come about for you?
You can imagine that, and you know, by 97, I'd already had in my opinion, humble opinion, I'd already had like quite a prolific DJ career for 7 years. So although Jungle, you know, I think Jungle Fever started in 1994. So I'd already done 4 years before anybody was even calling it Jungle.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was before then, you know what I mean? You know, people like Paul Ibiza, they had records with that word on the label way before then. But, you know, like my other peers like Brocky and so on, and these other names that came in, you know, they came in a lot. They came in and started to be more proliferation of their name around about that 1994 era, you know. And so by 97, I'd already done a lot.
Yeah.
And frankly, I also thought that I was pretty much on my way out. It was just because it was changing.
Okay.
It was changing.
Yes.
The music was changing. The clientele was changing. You know, there was a lot of things going on. You can imagine. Probably this is not the time to get into it, but you can imagine that for me, as a young sort of working class background, having a bit more disposable income, it comes with its trappings, you know. And this ducker's got a thing to say about it. What do you want to say about that? You're from the where?
It's a budding MC.
Where are you from? Oh, he's agreeing with me. Yeah, it's not hard. It's not easy out here. And yeah, I just by 97, you know, I'd moved moved into like this warehouse flat in Old Street, and everybody used to come there, and it was just like this party place. And
in the good old days of Old Street, when Old Street was not the craziness that it is now.
Yes, right? That's right. Yeah, it was great time. Don't get me wrong. We were having a whale of a time, and I was, you know, like obviously still playing around with production and what have you. And I'd had a few records out by that time, but I was never ever a prolific producer. I was fortunate that whenever I did produce something, you know, like it gained some traction, but I wouldn't class myself as like a prolific producer at all.
Yeah.
But the chap who was at Parousia was a guy, and I can't remember his name, but forgive me, but I think his name was Rob Melbourne.
Okay.
And he was a lovely guy, really kind of calm, gentle soul, you know. And he used to come to my flat. I mean, this flat, everybody used to turn up there. Sometimes I'd be like, what are you doing in here? I'll turn around and somebody else is there. And it was like a vibe, it was like a little hub. And anyway, he was like, yeah, I want to offer you a deal. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, we'd like to do a deal, you know, like a short play album or a long play EP, whichever way you want to put it.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, and I think I wrote it in a post the other day, you know, there were so many conflicting things going on for me at that time as a DJ, as Ron, in personal life, as well as my creative life. And then I start this project. So I'm starting this project with a few quid in my pocket, and it's like, I've never had the experience of having to focus in on a project of your own.
Yeah.
at a time when I'm conflicted about the scene and the culture.
Yeah, right.
Through my lens, and I think that came out in the album. It was like, in my opinion, it was a bit of this, a bit of that, a little bit of this, a bit of that. I don't think it was all wrong.
Okay.
In fact, I know it wasn't.
Okay.
And so we went through the process, and the irony is that during the process, Rob, in his personal life, something happened with him as well, which is his own personal stuff, and he left BMG.
Right.
And but the album came out, and that was it. And I just reserved it to the annals of time.
So fast forward to, as you know very well, when I was at the ADE conference in Amsterdam a couple of years ago, and as you're aware, I was just hanging out with different people, catching up, and I was chatting to my good friend James McGuinness, who's at YouTube. James is a Bristol junglist from back in the day, and we will often, on the one hand, we do apparently sometimes talk business, but we tend to just talk about old records.
Is that time already?
So we're just kind of like, and he, out of nowhere, he's just saying to me, so, that DJ Ron tune? And I'm like, what? And to my embarrassment and my ignorance, I'm like, James, what are you talking about? It's like, off the album. I'm like, what album? And we get into this
album that Ron hid.
That was lost in the annals of Ron time.
Yeah.
And so we have this fantastic conversation, and he's saying to me, look, there's this tune, 21st Century. And it's like, and he was like saying to me, when I was DJing regularly, like, I'd always start my set with this tune. I'm like, so he sends me the YouTube link to it. And I'm like, probably when I get back to London a couple of days later, I message you, and I'm like, Ron, what's this about? And actually before that, I'd gone on Discogs and I bought the triple vinyl, and I think I sent you a photo.
Yeah, you did.
of the record on my turntable with the cover there, with a very young looking Ron on the front, looking down like drum and bass people always look
looking down like,
go down.
Go and put this behind me.
I'll look down and I need to clean my shoes. And and I see in the photo, and I'm like, come on then, what's this about? And I said to you at the time, because your album, crucially, this was back in 24, we started this conversation. Late 24, we started the conversation.
Was it that far long ago?
Yeah.
Right, really?
And of course, the first thing I'd done is that I'm like looking on Spotify and Apple Music. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
It was only on YouTube, because James sent me the YouTube link to the tune, and then there's that, I can't think of the name of that jungle channel, which has the tracks from the album on there. And I kind of went through the tracks, I bought the vinyl, and then we kind of started this conversation. And the thing that really, really struck me was it's not just like, oh, my man had an album out in 97. Not just that, it's like, hold on, this tune, and it's quite telling that it's called 21st Century. For me, it's like, that tune sounds fresh. That was the conversation that me and James were having. It was like, not just him saying, I used to start on my sets with this in the 90s and the 2000s. He's like, trust me, it sounds fresh today. And this is the conversation I started having with you. But you were like, what, really?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, the thing is, that record, thanks James, by the way, because it was literally the idea that somebody else really, really liked it. And that I was like, I'd rather no one hear it, right? Which was the catalyst for me going ahead with it, because it's the idea that music is so subjective, and that for me to then hide this away, rather it come out now, and then somebody finds it when I'm dead, and they're like, oh right, my God, this piece of music, or whatever, right? But yeah, thanks James, because that, what you said to me, that and the fact that he started his set with that tune to gauge the crowd.
Yes, yeah.
Made me think, let's have a little listen to it again. And then obviously you came with your silver tongue, Chris, smooth silver tongue. Come on, Ron. You know what I mean? There must be something we can do.
Still got it, Ron.
Yeah, I know you still got it. And then with that,
although to be fair, I got you into the office and I sat you down, and the thing is that I think
played it loud
twice.
Yeah.
But also because I had this sneaking feeling that maybe there was something that you weren't quite telling me, that perhaps, I don't know, maybe you'd made it with someone else and there'd been a bit of a falling out or whatever. But the great thing about, for me, that experience was like playing it to you twice. And before I played it, you were like, your thing to me was, thing is, Chris, I just don't think it's very good. And I was like, what?
Yeah, no.
It was like, I really respect the honesty and the openness. And that's why I wanted to play it to you a couple of times. And then actually after that, you just looked at me and went, it's not bad,
I'll tell you what it is. After nearly 30 years of not listening to a record, like anything, or like some food you might eat or a song you hear, it takes you back to that time. There's another record on that which is called Kane and Land, the Millennium Mix. And the intro to that song as well, I listened to it last night before coming to this interview, and it really brought me back to that time. And it wasn't on the surface, it looked like it was a really pleasant time, but it was like there was a lot going on. And I remember making those two records and making that album, and I remember missing an entire summer.
Right.
An entire summer making that album, not having that experience of making an album before. That album was almost the catalyst for me to stop producing.
Wow.
Yeah, true story. That almost the trauma of it.
The sort of burden of doing it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so now when I look at it retrospectively, and going back to listening to that record at the time, and you playing it then and playing it over, you were saying, right, and playing it over, I can hear what I was doing, and I can understand how I made it and why I made it, and I was just having a bit of fun. I was just having a bit of fun toying with a style that is not necessarily me.
Okay.
And I think that's what it is when I said, no, I don't really like it, because it's like not something that I would say, hey, look at it, look, here are everyone, this is me. Because it's a version, some small version of me just having fun. That's what that record was, yeah.
But so, we were delighted I was delighted to be able to have that conversation, have that whole experience, from James to sitting down with you to then you finding the DAT.
Yeah, imagine that.
And bringing the DAT in, and we got that digitized and mastered. And then also, you and I talked about, it feels appropriate that we get maybe a contemporary version done, and we're really chuffed that Dev Bladerunner, who felt like such a natural choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
For multiple reasons that lots of people should know, that he came in and just sort of kind of gave it a contemporary refresh.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now it's coming out in hospital, which is amazing.
Yeah, for me, that whole journey with this record, our friendship, Dev's skill set, hospital records, it's like, it just feels like organic that this is, if it was something was gonna happen, that this is the home for something, for it to happen.
Yeah, amazing.
And when Dev, he kindly said that he would do the mix. Since he's done that, I've had that now for, I don't know, maybe 8 months or something like that. And I've played it every single set.
Yeah, amazing.
Every single set.
Amazing.
And so big up Dev for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's probably just appropriate to also explain that, like, you sort of moved away from the music scene for a while.
Yes.
Right? Now, I think it was roughly 2017, 2018 when you and I connected properly.
Yes.
At Rinse.
That's right.
Because you've been a sort of foundational part of Rinse with Genius.
I'd say foundational. I'd say that G is my good friend, one of my closest friends. And but he was also my boss.
Okay.
So I worked at Rinse for 5 years as head of their TV department.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where the relationship was formed.
Yeah.
And then obviously when I left and I went on to Pastures New, that we maintained that friendship. And so when I came there and I saw you there with with
Danny Bird.
With Danny, yeah.
And Uncle Doug's.
That's right, yeah. You had just come off saying, oh, I was just talking about you.
I think also there was like, am I right in saying that there was another sort of fairly significant moment, was that Chase and Status asked if you would join them on their Return to Jungle tour, 2019?
Again, this is the sort of like, these, I could class them as sliding door moments. You could class them as stars aligning, yeah? But at the time of me coming back into this, in this way, so I'd been around the music, but I was just Ron Samuels. You know, I wasn't as DJ Ron. And every now and again, somebody would go, are you DJ Ron? I'd be like, yeah. And they'd be like, oh yeah, man, this is my friend. He wants you to play. Oh, I don't really do that anymore. I don't really do this. I don't really do that. And in fact, what had happened was that it turned out that, just a short story, that with the Return to Jungle and Chase and Status Return to Jungle, you know, they openly say, you know, they couldn't do that without saying, okay, like, we're going to have some foundation 100%. Members and whatever. And they handpicked those people. Myself, Randall, and others. Yeah. And one of the sort of activations they wanted to do was at the carnival.
That's right. Yeah.
And they couldn't get into the carnival because the carnival was a closed shop. And vicariously through Rinse, they were able to get a plot that Rinse had used before.
Okay.
But the chap who ran that plot, he let's just say that he has a particular way of working.
Okay.
and as a result of that, Rinse were like, look, we don't really want to get involved because we don't want to break down any relationships with you, etc. And they felt that the only person really that could help would be Ron.
Okay, nice.
And with that, I worked very closely at the time with Sophie, that's Will's wife, and the production team, which was behind that, which was a lot to do with Obi as well.
Right, Echo
at the time. And we ended up kind of like doing that. And with that, I then ended up working for a short period of time with Obi when he set up Afro Nation. And we had a great relationship and a great time together until, again, I went on to Pastures New. And so the timing of that Return to Jungle was also, I'd say, quite a significant marketing opportunity for DJ Ron coming back in, because now it's like Ron is on this flyer for these events, and it's like, and you can imagine most people are like, who's Ron?
Well, let's be fair, not everyone's saying that.
Not everyone's saying that. But yeah.
But it's also like, you know, I mean, fair play to Will and Saul, like, you know, still like, you know, an outstanding like act, like huge profile, like within music in general, let alone in drum and bass and jungle. And I think, like, you know, it's really nice to see things come full circle, right? In that respect. Also, so then off the back of that, well, not necessarily off the back of that tour, but as then coming through and off the back of, say, 2020 and COVID and stuff, and then really getting into your own podcast and now your own club night, and things are on a roll. It feels like things are on a roll.
Do you know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. It's very simple. It's like, when I came back into this industry, there weren't that many record labels. And when I say there weren't that many record labels, the record labels that were there, that at one time, you know, everybody had a record label and was putting records out. It wasn't really like that. I didn't really understand a lot of the music that was out there at the time. And I didn't really know what my position in this would be, me now stepping back into it. And so I just let it reveal itself to me. And that revelation was such that we started our event back in 2024. And we just, you know, did baby steps, you know. And used the leverage of like my relationships with my friends to try to bring something to Hackney of a higher quality than we could do commercially for a space that holds 300 people. And I have to say a big shout out to Frost for what he does in Brixton Bass, because that was pretty much my inspiration.
Okay. And I've been down to Earth Kitchen and it's absolutely jumping.
Yeah, it's a really good night out. Really good night out.
And we also, last summer we welcomed you to Hospitality on the Beach, which we will get you back again this year. And that was a lot of fun.
That was it. You know what the most remarkable thing about that was? I remember when I got there and I was like, what are you doing here? No, you don't know anyone here. And then all these lovely people were coming up and saying so many complimentary things to really make me feel comfortable. And obviously you yourself made me feel very comfortable there and welcoming, and as did the rest of the Tisno Mafia.
Yeah.
And it was a great time, you know what I mean? And with just speaking about the club night, and with this record as well.
Yeah.
And just generally with this scene, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of naysayers.
Sure.
And there's a lot of things that are never perfect or not necessarily ideal. But I'm really enthusiastic about it. I think that because I remember 1990, you know what I mean? And here we are. I remember 1990 when there wasn't even a name called Jungle, let alone a name called Drum and Bass.
Yeah.
And so for it to be like this, from wherever it was, some people say Hackney, some people say South London, but wherever it spawned, for it now to be this global music genre, I think that I'm going to roll it out, man.
Absolutely.
Now that I'm here, I'm gonna roll this one out, and so I appreciate this sort of like interaction, so that I can, just say to others out there, if you're wherever you are, or wherever you're positioned in this, you know what I mean. This is a nice place to be. This scene.
100%. And I suppose I feel as though one thing that because it's our 30th anniversary this year, and I feel that something that we have an opportunity to do is, we're always about emerging talent, but we are also about the tempo and about the culture and about the history. And I feel as though, as a company and as a team, we have an opportunity to actually stop for a minute and shine a light, and also maybe dig a little bit deeper and shine a light on some of the foundational men and women who perhaps have been slightly overlooked for a bunch of different reasons, for whatever that might be, and to be able to be lucky enough to then be a part of that journey with them, like your good self, is a real privilege.
Yeah. I get it. I've seen your journey. I've seen Hospital's journey. And in seeing that journey, and then for you to be able to review your own journey and then look at it and say, well, no, you know what? We have an opportunity and we have a platform and we have the resources.
Yes.
Then, to then go, something. Yeah, let's do something different to where we started.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing before we finish, that Gypsy Woman bootleg, is that you?
Yes.
I only just worked that out this morning. I'm going through some YouTube mixes. Hold on a minute. High Contrast Essential Mix, 2003.
Yes.
On BBC Radio 1. And of course, for my entire, I helped Lincoln just source records for that and stuff. A seminal essential mix for Lincoln and for us as a in a label. And when you look at the tracks, things there's a few unknown dub plates in there. And this morning I'm like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Because the one that that I love is the Little Man.
Yes.
That's one of my favourites.
Oh, thank you.
But then hold on, Gypsy Woman as well. And Lincoln does this excellent blend from that into New Tone, Do It, Feel It.
I haven't heard that. I need to have a listen to it. Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. It's been my pleasure as well, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Is that okay?
Awesome.